Step into the captivating world of the Behind the Curtain podcast, where your dynamic hosts, John Dyer and Dr. Mohamed Saleh, bring together a wealth of 60 years of combined experience in healthcare and manufacturing. Join us every week as we delve into intriguing topics, weaving unscripted conversations that promise to take you on an unpredictable and enlightening journey. Gain valuable insights for your continuous improvement adventure as we navigate uncharted territories with enthusiasm and expertise. Welcome to a podcast that goes beyond the ordinary, unraveling the mysteries behind the curtain of knowledge.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Behind the Curtain. I am one of your hosts, John Dyer, and with me is my co-host, Dr. Mohamed Saleh, and we're continuing our discussion on leadership characteristics, a critically important topic when it comes to team-based improvement like lean, changing the culture, those kinds of things. And we're actually up to characteristic number 8, empathy, having empathy for others. So, Dr. Mohamed, what are your thoughts when it comes to empathy as a leadership characteristic?
You know, that is one of these characteristics that's truly a skill. And we, I think, take it for granted many of the times. In many organizations, sometimes it's even viewed as a weakness, unfortunately. But I want to, as we start going down this conversation, take a step back because I had, in the beginning of my career, misunderstood the definition of empathy. And I'm not sure if our listeners are in this situation or not. So I was watching a keynote speech by the head of Cleveland Clinic, and just talking about the difference between sympathy and empathy. And it really resonated with me. And it was kind of an eye-opener. It was like 5 or 6 years ago, probably 6 years ago at this point. And she was talking about if you see someone in a pit and you're watching them from the outside in, and you understand the pain that they're going through, that's sympathy. That's not empathy. Empathy is volunteering and jumping in the pit with that individual and going through the struggles, the feelings, the reality of that individual. And a lot of times we like, oh, I'm empathetic towards that person. I've been there. That's not empathetic. That's being sympathetic. Empathetic, and that's really the point of this episode, is being able to feel what they feel, be able to go through the emotional struggles they're going through and help them out together. So setting that kind of as our foundation, I think that one of the first points of being empathetic is being a good active listener. And being able to hear and value what others are saying, others' perspectives, and being able to that person to actually feel that they're heard. I would say that is a cornerstone of being empathetic, and we take active listening for granted as well. But you can't be empathetic if you are not able to allow the other person to feel heard, which is a skill all on its own for you to actually listen. So what's your thoughts on that?
Right. Well, and I would even take that one step further, right? Is I totally agree. It's active listening, but then it's doing something with that information. Not just being a sounding board, not just being a therapist, letting the person, vent their anger, but truly hearing them and realizing that the reason that they're venting or that they, have, work issues is because they're in a horribly designed system, and it's one of my favorite Dr. Deming quotes, and I've mentioned it several times, is that, a bad system will beat a good person every time. And guess what? It's not the workers who designed that system. It's the engineers, it's the leaders, and if it's done in a vacuum by themselves without input from the workers, then you're probably going to have a bad system, a bad design. So yeah, it's critically important to hear what people are saying, not filtering it through your own mindset. It's like, oh yeah, well, they're just a grump, or they really don't know what's really going on. But actually hearing it and then doing something with that information in order to try to um, make things better. I mean, that's really what this is all about, is how do we make things better for everyone, for the workers, for the leaders, for the company, for everybody.
Yeah, I see it sometimes as like a three-step process of empathy. The first one is, does the person feel heard?
Right.
The second one is, do they genuinely know that you care and are concerned based on what you heard? And I think that's both care and concern, I think are important. And then the third piece is, have you created a safe space um, for that person to see you vulnerable as well? And being able to show your own humanity in this process. In this process, um, at that point, if we're going to go down the path of innovation, when we talk about empathy, um, there's a Dr. Paul Duchamp used to say this to me a lot, and it resonated. I love the term that he used. He never used to use the word waste walks, or very rarely did I see him say that. He was a physician who would say, "Let's go out and find pebbles in people's shoes." And because the essence of that has empathy within it. Let's find the things that are frustrating people in their processes every single day. And I think the pebbles in people's shoes are such a great acronym, a great metaphor, because it shows empathy. These people they're in pain, they're struggling, but it requires those people to remove their own pebbles. What you're doing is you're giving them the space, the free the safe space to be able to stop, take off their shoes, and remove that pebble.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's not easy. I mean, so I learned this very early in my career. The story I like to share on this particular topic. I mean, I was fresh out of college. I was part of the GE management training program, where we had 4 6-month assignments. And this one particular assignment, I was over all the inspectors for this particular plant. And when I got the job, when I went into the job, I was told there's this one worker, just stay away from him. He's grumpy, grouchy. He'll tear your head off. He's horrible to work with. In fact, he's in his own little room because nobody likes working with this guy. And he basically was the final tester for the product. It was an electronic product, and he did a final test. So first day, of course, I was naive. I didn't know what I was doing, and maybe if I did, I might have been a little more scared. But first thing I did was walk into this guy's room and introduce myself, and of course, right off the bat, he started insulting me. I was like, "Who are you? You're my boss. Do you even know how to tie your shoes? What are you doing telling me how to do my job? And just on and on and on." But I ended that conversation with, "What can I do to help you?" Right? "What can I do to help you?" And he was like, "Oh, there's nothing you can do to help me." Right? So I went back the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And every time I would end the conversation with, "What can I do to help you?" And after, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks of this, he finally was like, "You're not going to leave me alone, are you?" And I'm like, "No, I'm here to help. I want to help you do your job." And he said, "Well, there's a light that's been burned out for years and nobody's ever gotten it fixed. And it makes it hard for me to see what I'm doing." I'm like, "Okay, great. Let me take care of that." And I went out, and that night actually went to, a hardware store and bought some lights. And the next day I worked with the maintenance guys and we got the light repaired. And he was just floored. He was like, "Whoa, I've been asking for this for months and nobody's ever done anything for me." He still insulted me, he still called me all kinds of names, right? But at least he was like, well, at least you heard me. And then I was like, well, what else can I do to help? And it turns out, I mean, he was an older man, and you could tell that his fingers were starting to get some arthritis, and putting the leads in for this electronic was really starting to hurt his hands. And he was like, well, it really hurts me when I put these leads in. And I'm like, well, gosh, I started looking at the machine he was working with, and these things hadn't been replaced for years. So I did some digging and called the manufacturer of the equipment, and turned out it was pretty easy to put in all new connectors, which we did over a weekend. And he came in that next morning, that Monday morning, and I mean, literally had tears in his eyes. It was like, oh my gosh, these are great. This is so much easier. And I tell you, his demeanor changed completely. He went from a grouchy, grumpy old man, just doing the bare minimum of what he needed to do to get the job done, to a friendly, kind of a guy that was, I mean, he still insulted me every once in a while, but that was just him. But I mean, he started asking what he could do to help the other inspectors. And he started attending some of the training classes, and attending some of the, discussions on how to make things better. So, you know, I was told early in my career that there's always a certain percentage of people who come to work purposely wanting to do a bad job. And I have thrown that out now. I mean, yeah, you might still have like 0.1%, but I think most people really want to do a good job, really want to contribute, really want to be part of a winning team. But you just gotta, get them engaged, get them involved, ask them what their problems are, what their troubles are, how can you help? And I mean, that goes so far in building that cohesive team trusting environment. So I think
Yeah.
this is one of the key characteristics. I think empathy, I
Yeah.
think some people think empathy shows weakness, like you were saying, but I think it's one of the most important characteristics we've discussed so far.
I agree. I agree. And there's two other formats that this could come out in. And I'm very moved by your story because there's so much packed in that if we dissected it. One way is during difficult conversations, when empathy comes out, as a leader specifically. And it's you know one of the things I'm learning, at least as a leader, is to show compassion during difficult times, in difficult conversations. And we talked about it in the respect for people characteristics, about having that win-win scenario, that the other person feels as they walk away that you didn't come into this with an agenda, that you are there, that you have their back. And so, having compassion during difficult conversation, maintaining that human dignity, so that it doesn't feel like you're belittling them when you're giving them feedback, especially when things go wrong. I think it is a critical platform and vehicle to be able to demonstrate empathy.
I agree. Yeah.
Uh, the other one, and it depends on what kind of listeners are listening right now. That this could this is a one that's near and dear to my heart, and it violates respect for people when done incorrectly. But the impact people have with their decision making, and making sure that we're empathetic when we make certain decisions, to understand how that's going to either promote a certain culture or destroy a certain culture. And the example that came to mind right now is when leaders say, you know what, where our volume is low, we're going to have to cut 20% of our people. It was, the leader that made that statement. Okay, honestly, there's no empathy in that statement. It's a number, 20%. Let's just cut 20% of the people. And these people are not the ones that messed up.
Right.
It's the leadership team, the upper management that didn't maybe push the sales process, and didn't bring any volumes, and didn't have scenario plans and backup plans. If we lose this customer, what's our backup plan to preserve our people? How do we redeploy people on other plans? That it's quick. Like, and I think people need to understand when they make decisions, it has to be people centric at times, and they have to prioritize some of the things that impact people. And they have a responsibility when they make decisions to also be empathetic.
Yeah, and I tell you, it's even worse than that, Mohammed. Think about the leaders who cut that 20% people just to make the numbers for that month or for that quarter. In other words, so short-sighted. And I've seen this happen where they'll lay off 20% of the people, and then the next quarter starts and they bring them all back. And or they pay, twice as much to bring on, to try to get people back, or maybe it's more of a cyclical kind of a business, and they lay the people off, and then it takes 3 or 4 months to train new people, so when the business comes back, they're scrambling to hire and train at 10 times the cost those people, versus just saying, hey, we're in a lull. We understand, but we truly believe the business is coming back. So we're going to do what we can to keep people engaged. And, who knows, maybe we could take those 20% of those folks and put them on improvement teams and actually, start breaking bottlenecks and trying to get rid of the chaos in order to make the system healthier. So when the business does come back, you're ready for it.
Yep. Yep.
So, again, sometimes that short term mentality destroys all empathy that a leader might have, because there's under so much pressure to make the
Yeah.
numbers.
When we come to as we're coming to a close right now, John, this is a skill. You can't wake up one day and be like, I'm gonna be empathetic from now on. You have to practice the active listening. People feel heard, being able to understand the impact your decision has on the organization, being able to find pebbles in people's shoes, being able to foster innovation. These are all skills that feed into being empathetic. And I would say the other two that we haven't mentioned that I think we should just kind of bring to light is being able to practice mindfulness. I think that's a skill all on its own that feeds empathy, and being able to be emotionally intelligent. Sometimes you're talking to a person and you see that they're sad, and so being just there's no agenda here, but you'd be like, hey, are you okay? And sometimes it's during like a performance review, and someone hasn't hit their numbers for the last 3 weeks or the last 3 months, and you'll be like, hey, you've been doing really good in the last 3 months. It seems like there's a downward trend here. Are you okay? And just being able to be mindful of that and practicing mindfulness and being able to read the room and having emotional intelligence to be able to show empathy, I think are two I would say components of empathy that we shouldn't lose sight of.
Yeah, and again, and it all goes back to the root cause that we've talked about, redefining a promotable leader. And if a promotable leader has these characteristics that we're listing out, the 10, then they should be promotable leaders in the company. But think about it, right? If I'm so busy putting out fires or attending, meetings or showing that I'm so busy, if that's what the promotional criteria is, then I'm not going to take the time to actually sit down and ask people these kinds of questions. Hey, how are you doing? Because I get no credit for that in the traditional promotable structure.
Mhm.
Versus, if as we redefine what a good promotable leader really is, well, this should be top of the list. So, one of the questions that I would ask as the boss would be, to my leadership team would be, hey, how much time are you spending out on the shop floor talking to your employees? How many times do you have lunch with them and just ask them how their day is? With groups of them, how much time do you spend, getting to know their family and kids' names and things like that. And that should be top of the list for promotable leaders. But
No, yeah,
unfortunately, it's not in a lot of cases.
you're absolutely right. Being able to understand separate realities is a behavior that I think is critical, and being able to value empathy in the organization as we define what good characteristics of an organization should be, I think should be at every organization's top of the list. This was an amazing conversation.
Well, one last thing before we
Okay.
end, because we have one more minute left. You mentioned that it's a skill, right? Empathy is a skill. So most organizations do charitable work outside of their company.
Yes.
But why? Why do they do charitable work? Is it just to check a box? Is it to promote their brand? Is it to, cut a nice commercial to say, hey, we, supported the 4K run for cancer? Or is it to actually practice this skill of empathy? In other words, how many of your workers have actually,
Yeah.
served food to the homeless,
Mhm.
have actually gone to those, feeding organization, food bank type organizations, and actually handed grocery bags of food to people in need at all levels. Not I'm talking, from the shop floor workers to the engineers to the leaders to the executives. How often do they actually practice empathy outside of work?
Yeah.
And that helps develop that skill, I think.
Absolutely, because if in almost every organization has this as a value, but care, like, do you
Right.
genuinely care?
But
And
again, is it just to check a box, or is it to
or
really drive that into the culture?
exactly, like the word genuine should have meaning and weight to it, and people should have a sense of pride that they're being able to give back to the community.
Right.
I think that was a really good point, John, because it is a skill. And we have many vehicles, and the bigger the organization is, the more vehicles they have to be able to show empathy. And I think people should never do it as a facade. They should do it with genuine heart and care, and they should genuinely feel concerned for people.
Right.
Yeah,
I agree.
excellent. Well, this was a wonderful episode. I hope everyone enjoyed it, and I look forward to the next leadership characteristic, John.
Very good. All right. Take care, everybody.
Take care, everyone.
As we draw the curtains on another fascinating episode, we wanted to express our gratitude for joining us on this enlightening journey. If you're hungry for more captivating and thought-provoking discussions with John Dyer and Dr. Mohamed Saleh, hit that subscribe button to ensure you don't miss a beat. Until next week, keep exploring, stay inquisitive, and stay inspired. See you on the next Behind the Curtain adventure.